Hello, this is Rabbi Daniel Kirzane recording a lesson about the December dilemma as part of our series here at the Temple Congregation B'nai Yehuda on celebrating Jewish holidays at home. Today we're going to be thinking about what is on the minds of many Jewish families today. How do we navigate the intersection between Christmas and Hanukkah? So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about how Jewish families celebrate holidays, how we celebrate or don't celebrate Christmas in particular, how we celebrate Christmas with other people, with people who are part of our family but who don't live in our house, or with friends or other members of the community, and how we consider the celebration of Christmas in general in our community, especially with regard to a Christmas tree. So the first thing I want to start with is to remind everybody that there are texts that accompany this lesson. Hopefully you have those texts in front of you. You might want to take a moment to pause the recording and to read through these texts. You also may want to read them as the recording goes and to pause as we go along, though I will be sharing the highlights and the most important pieces of the texts during the lesson itself. First, some history. These are old questions. Sometimes we have a sense that the questions that we're asking about how we celebrate Christmas in a Christian community or how we should celebrate Hanukkah or other Jewish holidays in a Christian community are new to us, that our parents and our grandparents had it a lot easier or had a different set of questions. Even though, of course, life was very different 50 and 100 years ago, these questions still remained. So our first text is an example of that. Ludwig Lewison became a very important literary critic in the United States, and as an interesting footnote, he was raised in a very secular German home. His entire family converted to Christianity, though when he went to apply to become a professor, he was told that a Jew could never be a professor at an American university. Here he was, having been raised as a Methodist. So he returned to his Jewish roots. He became a firm and staunch believer and a pious Jew in his own way, and he became a critique of assimilation into American culture. So here he's writing in a book in 1922 called Upstream about his childhood in Germany. And he writes the following. Two scenes stand before me which symbolize the character of the social group from which I sprang. This is one. I am sitting in a half-darkened room, and my heart beats and my cheeks burn. It is Christmas Eve. I look out through the dark pane across the street. Ah, there, behind an uncurtained window, a tree with candles. Quickly, I turn my eyes away. The reader here may be thinking that he wants nothing to do with Christmas or this Christmas tree, especially if they're familiar with him as a critic of assimilation and of the way that Jews are treated in Christian society. And yet he continues, I do not want to taste the glory until it is truly mine. And at last a bell rings, the folding doors open, and there, in the drawing room, stands my own tree in its glimmering splendor, and around it charming German toys and books of fairy tales and marchpane from Königsberg. And my mother takes me by the hand and leads me to the table, and I feel as though I myself were walking straight into a fairy tale. Ludwig Lewison, renowned literary critic of his time, had a Christmas tree in his home when he lived in Germany. A Jewish home, a home with two Jewish parents, and yet his parents wanted their children to fit into the society around them. Now, clearly, Lewison feels in a complicated way about his own childhood and how it relates to his Jewish adulthood. The point here is that this took place 120 years ago, and here he is having the same kinds of questions that we have in our own families. Another piece out of history that shows us that these questions are not new is a letter that was printed in the Jewish Daily Forward, or the Vorwärts in Yiddish, in 1941. It's the second text in your text packet. A reader from the Bronx writes into the editor describing how she and her husband had come to America as immigrants from Galicia as soon as they were married. They had children and raised them to live in a kosher home. She describes herself as more liberal than her husband, who was a rabbi, but one who still went to shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. They raised their children in a kosher home, and when visiting friends for Christmas one day, on Christmas Eve, they came to visit also their son and his family. They walk into the room and see, lo and behold, there is their Jewish son with his Jewish wife setting up a Christmas tree with their Jewish children. "Merry Christmas," they say to their grandparents, and she and her husband are in shock. She wants to stay and visit with the family, but her husband will have nothing to do with it. So she writes to the editor of the paper to say, "What shall I do? How can I conduct myself in this family?" And the editor, Ab Kahan, one of the most well-known authors and figures in Judaism at this time, wrote the following: "The national American holidays are celebrated here with love and joy by Jews and Gentiles alike. But Christmas is the most religious Christian holiday, and Jews have nothing to do with it." He goes on to defend the perspective that this son should not indeed be putting up a Christmas tree or celebrating with his children. He continues, though, to say, "But he, the father, must not quarrel with his son. It is actually your husband's fault, because he probably did not instill the Jewish traditions in his son. Instead of being angry with him, he should talk to his son and explain the meaning of Christmas to him." So here, 1941, so we're 50 years after Ludwig Lewisohn, but still 70 years before now, is dealing with these same questions. Now, interestingly, Ab Kahan had previously written a story that dealt specifically with the Christmas tree in 1899. So this was over 40 years before the publication of this letter in his newspaper. He wrote a short story entitled Katie and Leah, in which he had a kind of a dialogue between these two women. He was able sympathetically to represent the position on both sides of this question. Should we have a Christmas tree in our Jewish home? Should we not have a Christmas tree in our Jewish home? But now, 40 years later, he seems not to be very sympathetic with the notion that a Jewish family would have a Christmas tree in order to fit in. This isn't so unusual for Ab Kahan. You can see in many of the things that he does, especially in the way he treats intermarriage, that he kind of has this strange balance. On the one hand, he's a socialist, and he really tries to promote the notion of the common humanity of all people, and that there shouldn't be distinctions which keep us apart. And on the other hand, he is a particularist, and he loves being Jewish, and he wants to advance and support the notion of Jewishness in America. And so sometimes those values come into conflict. Here, in this case, he is a bit characteristic in trying to support the notion of a traditional Jewish way of life, while also saying the most important thing, ultimately, is shalom bayit, is peace at home, and that needs to take precedence. So even if it means tolerating a Christmas tree, that's what it takes to live harmoniously in this society. So, again, these texts don't necessarily argue Jews should have Christmas trees, Jews shouldn't have Christmas trees, but the point is these questions have been live for the Jewish community in Europe and in America for decades and even for more than a century throughout the modern era. So this idea of a Christmas tree really does become symbolic. Christmas trees in our homes, in the homes of intermarried families or interfaith families, and also Christmas trees indeed in Jewish families. What is the symbol of a Christmas tree in our homes? And then we'll speak also about what the symbol of a Christmas tree in the public square is. So first, let's think about what's actually going on in the Jewish world today. In 2013, the Pew Foundation did a landmark study of the Jewish community, and they have lots of data which has been very helpful and influential in the Jewish community since then. So one of the questions they asked was about having a Christmas tree in your home. And there are some noteworthy statistics that they find. According to the Pew study, 32% of Jews have a Christmas tree in their home. Of the Jews who are married to someone who is not Jewish, 71% have a Christmas tree in their home. And of Jews who are married to someone who is Jewish, 7% have a Christmas tree in their home. So in other words, 7 out of 100 Jews who are married to Jews have Christmas trees. 30% of Reform Jews have Christmas tree in their home. 51% of Jews with no denomination have Christmas trees in their home. And interestingly enough, 4% of modern Orthodox Jews have Christmas trees in their home. 1 out of 25 Orthodox homes has a Christmas tree. What does this mean? What does it mean to have a Christmas tree in one's home? We're tempted to say that if an Orthodox Jew has a Christmas tree in their home, clearly there's something that isn't about celebrating Jesus as the Messiah that's going on here. And I believe that, at least in the legal realm, that is indeed what we're seeing in the world. There have been a couple of Supreme Court cases that have dealt with the notion of how can public funds be used to support or to set up holiday displays in December time. And among other symbols, the Christmas tree has been considered. So in the Supreme Court case from 1989, the County of Allegheny versus the ACLU, the Supreme Court decided that there is a difference between specifically religious symbols and secular symbols, even of a holiday like Christmas. So they conclude that the Christmas tree, unlike a menorah, is not itself a religious symbol. That a menorah can't be distinguished from its religion, but a Christmas tree indeed can. A Christmas tree is secular. Although Christmas trees once carried religious connotations, they conclude, today they typify the secular celebration of Christmas. Elsewhere, the court concludes, the Christmas tree is the preeminent secular symbol of the Christmas holiday season. Now, there is a footnote in the discussion of this case that is the following. Although the Christmas tree represents the secular celebration of Christmas, its very association with Christmas, a holiday with religious dimensions, makes it conceivable that the tree might be seen as representing Christian religion when displayed next to an object associated with the Jewish religion. The case in question here is whether public funds can be used to erect a Christmas tree next to a menorah. And the court is aware that a menorah is undeniably a religious symbol, and they say that the Christmas tree on its own is undeniably a secular symbol. But when you put them side by side, there's something to be said for, okay, well, we're having here two religious symbols, a Christian one and a Jewish one. Ultimately, they concluded that a Christmas tree is still a secular symbol, but they're aware that it does and can be religious. So what does this mean for us? What this means for us is that there is a notion that there's kind of a secular Christmas, that in a sense there are two holidays which take place on December 25th. There is the Christian holiday of Christmas, which celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ, and there's a secular holiday of Christmas, which is a national holiday where their banks are closed, that has to do with being with family and giving gifts and being of good cheer, of lighting up the life, of lighting up the world. And that secular holiday, that secular Christmas of December 25th, is what Jews are latching onto. In my own home, growing up, we celebrated Christmas. My father wasn't Jewish, though he did convert when I was an adult. And we celebrated Christmas throughout all of my childhood, and never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that we were doing something Christian. No, we were celebrating this holiday in a secular way. And if I had had language when I was a child to think of it this way, I probably would have said, there's two Christmases. There's a Christian Christmas and there's a secular Christmas, and that's what we did. Interestingly to me, the Jewish people in America have been really instrumental in creating this secular Christmas. Holiday Christmas songs like I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas and so on often were written by and promoted by Jews who were trying to create a space for their own celebration of the holiday season, as it were. And the building up of Hanukkah as a so-called alternative to Christmas, likewise, was a way to try to desacralize Christmas and to have a way that Jews can participate openly in the holiday season. And so the point that all of these texts seem to make to me is that there is a question about whether and how Jews should celebrate the religious holidays of another religion. I think generally speaking, the Jewish tradition discourages Jews from celebrating religious holidays of other religions. I think that our letter from the Forward demonstrates that it's common and accepted practice for Jews to celebrate religious holidays of other religions with people of other religions. You might remember that the woman who wrote into the newspaper was visiting friends for Christmas Eve. No problem. Doesn't elicit a comment. So there's no issue with Jews celebrating Christmas with other people, and I would continue that thought by saying that Jews who have non-Jews in their families, in-laws or ex-spouses or children who are not Jewish, should feel free to celebrate Christmas with those families and with those people. Whether a Jewish person or a Jewish family celebrates a religious holiday of another religion, though, that's generally considered discouraged from the Jewish perspective. However, Christmas in particular has become in many ways secularized. And if you look at the next text in your text sheet, there's a little essay by Rabbi Josh Brown, who considers what a quote-unquote kosher Christmas might look like. Again, he doesn't really want Jews to do a religious kind of Christmas, but he is aware that there is sort of a safe and happy and an encouraging way for Jews to celebrate Christmas. And a major point for him is that, quote, Judaism has long been, and certainly is today, too strong to be threatened by the presence of trees, dawning ornaments, or Christmas gifts given to Jewish grandchildren. He wants us to be aware that Judaism has endured a lot throughout our history. The story of Hanukkah itself is a story of triumph over assimilation into Greek overrule of traditional Jewish practice. And so the holiday of Hanukkah itself stands as a testament to Judaism's power to overcome secularizing impulses. We have withstood a lot worse than Christmas trees. Like, there's nothing threatening or dangerous about Christmas trees so long as we're aware of what being Jewish means to us. And so I think that this is really the pivot into what we should be doing in our own lives today. As long as we remember that we don't need to be afraid, we don't need to be threatened by Christmas trees, or by holiday cheer, and so on, so long as we're having open and clear communication with the people who we care about, as long as we're talking about what our Jewishness means to us, as long as we're talking about that with our spouse, with our children, with our parents, with our in-laws, with our friends, and so on, as long as we're able to articulate really to ourselves, what does a Christmas tree mean? Some of us may agree with the Supreme Court. A Christmas tree is a secular symbol, and it doesn't bother me any more than a gingerbread man or a snowman, or a jack-o'-lantern for that matter. We might think of other religious or pseudo-religious symbols that the Christmas tree might remind us more or less of, like a jack-o'-lantern. Or do we consider a jack-o'-lantern a secular symbol or a religious symbol tied to All Hallows Eve? Same with something like Valentine's Day cards, or wearing green on St. Patrick's Day. Even January 1st, New Year's Day, has deep Christian roots, or Christian roots deep in its history. How do we feel about the celebration of a day like that? So we might suss out where we fit along the spectrum of having decided that a certain holiday has become fully secular, like New Year's Day, or perhaps Halloween, or maybe for ourselves, this holiday still is religious in its entirety, that we might feel like the Christmas tree is a Christian symbol and it's a symbol of Christianity, and that feels really important to us. If that's the case, it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court says. It doesn't matter what other people say. If that's how it feels to you, then that's really important. So in either case, the way that we comport ourselves as Jews will reflect on how we fit into society and how society fits into our lives. So, for better or for worse, Hanukkah, the 25th day of the month of Kislev, is celebrated similarly in time to Christmas, the 25th day of the month of December. So whatever we do for Christmas, it's important to have a consideration of what we're going to do for Hanukkah, to know whether we're going to have a meaningful celebration of Hanukkah for 8 nights, and how it is that we're going to be with our families, and we're going to bring that into our lives. The informed choice that we make about that is going to be truly significant, and especially being open with our families is going to be really important. This is going to go with our kids' schools as well. It is important to remember that there are going to be a lot of people out there, even if it's not you, who think that a Christmas tree is indeed a secular symbol, and trying to remember that is going to be really helpful when figuring out what's going on at school with our children. And if there's something which is making you uncomfortable, whether it's a Christmas tree or anything else, having clear and open, respectful, and curious conversation with teachers and principals and other parents is going to be critical. So, in conclusion, each of us is an heir to our history. We've been dealing with, as modern Jews, with this question of Christmas and Hanukkah for many, many, many years. Abraham Geiger, the father of Reform Judaism, once said, "Beloved pilgrim, do not continually look backwards. Do not continually keep your eyes on the past. You must draw from the living present and labor in it. If we do not labor and produce from the innate spirit within us, as it is linked with the spirit of revelation, who shall?" As modern Jews, it is our responsibility to give meaning and life to the history that we've inherited and to transmit a rich and loving Judaism to the next generation. There are many questions that continue to be relevant to us and to our families about what it means to be Jewish at this season and what it means to be Jewish in all seasons. As we continue to inform ourselves about where we've come from, to learn more about what we feel and what those we love feel, and to make decisions that are right for us and for our families, then our religious lives, our secular lives, indeed all our lives, can continue to be filled with growth and with joy and with light. Let that be our blessing and our wish for this holiday season, for this season of holidays, as I wish everyone Chag Chanukah Sameach. May you have a wonderfully happy Festival of Lights.